The egg sizzled, a sharp, angry sound in the cavernous silence of the kitchen. Charlotte's hands trembled as she cracked a second one into the pan, the morning sun streaming through the window to illuminate the distant, imposing silhouette of Mount Rainier. 4 years. 1,461 days since Robert had kissed her goodbye, his familiar scent of coffee and aftershave lingering in the air. He'd promised to be back by dinner, his eyes alight with the simple joy of a solo hike, a day he said he needed to process the seismic shift of retirement. He'd disappeared into the wilderness he loved so much, and a part of her had disappeared with him. The shrill ring of the phone was a physical assault, startling her so badly the spatula clattered to the floor. She glanced at the caller ID, her breath catching in her throat. Mount Rainier National Park. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They hadn't called in over 2 years. Mrs. Charlotte Henley? The ranger's voice was professional yet buffered with a gentle caution she'd come to recognize. This is Ranger Mike Patterson. We need you to come to the station. Some hikers found a backpack yesterday lodged in a beaver dam. We've traced it through the GPS tracker's serial number. It belongs to your husband, Robert. The words were stones dropping into the still, deep well of her grief. She gripped the cool granite of the counter, her knuckles turning bone white. A backpack, after all this time. Yes, ma'am. Can you come to the ranger station? We have some questions and the county sheriff's office is already here. Charlotte's mind raced as she drove the familiar, tortuous route to the park, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Every curve in the road was a ghost. This was the road they'd driven together countless times. Robert pointing out a soaring eagle or a new patch of wildflowers, his excitement for another adventure as pure and infectious as a child's. He was always so careful, so methodical. The mountain demands respect, Char, he'd always say. She'd trusted his experience, his 30 years of hiking these very trails. The ranger station parking lot held 2 stark white police cruisers alongside the usual forest green park vehicles. Charlotte's stomach churned as she walked through the doors, the scent of pine and old wood, once a smell of adventure, now a trigger for profound loss. Ranger Patterson, a stocky man in his 40s with sympathetic eyes, greeted her. Mrs. Henley, thank you for coming. This is Detective Morrison from the county sheriff's office. Detective Morrison, a tall, severe woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, extended a cool, dry hand. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Please have a seat. They led her to a small, sterile conference room. There on the table, a monstrous artifact from a buried life, sat Robert's backpack. It was waterlogged and mud-stained, a gash tearing across one of the side pockets. But she recognized it instantly, the gray and blue osprey pack she'd given him for his 60th birthday. Complete with the small, faded red carabiner he always clipped to the side for his water bottle. Charlotte's breath hitched. The hikers found it lodged in a beaver dam about 8 miles downstream from Spray Falls, Ranger Patterson explained, his voice low. It was partially buried in branches and mud. We were able to trace the GPS device through its serial number. Detective Morrison opened a folder, her movements crisp and efficient. Mrs. Henley, we recovered the memory card from the GPS. The antenna was damaged, which is why we could never get a ping during any of our searches. But the card retained the data from before the damage occurred. Charlotte leaned forward, a terrible war waging in her chest between hope and dread. What? What did it show? The data indicates your husband went deliberately off trail that day. The detective pointed to a large topographical map spread on the table, her finger landing on a remote, jagged section of wilderness. The last signal came from right here, miles from any marked path. We dispatched a team to search those exact coordinates again yesterday afternoon, and this morning we found nothing. But Robert never went off trail. Charlotte protested, the words tasting like ash. He was meticulous. He filed his hiking plans, he stayed on marked paths. In 30 years, he never once deviated from his registered route. Detective Morrison's expression remained neutral, a mask of professional detachment. The GPS data is clear, Mrs. Henley. He was miles from where he told the Park Service he'd be hiking. Given this new evidence and the remote location, we're back to our original two possibilities: suicide or a tragic accident. Suicide? Charlotte's voice cracked. The word was an obscenity. Robert had just retired. We had plans. A cruise to Alaska, visiting our grandchildren in Oregon. He was excited. He was counting down the days. I understand this is difficult, the detective said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. But after 4 years, with wildlife and natural decomposition, there would be very little trace remaining. The search of those coordinates yielded nothing. Frankly, there's nothing more we can do. We won't be reopening the case. The walls of the small room seemed to close in. You're giving up? Just like that? We're not giving up, Mrs. Henley. We're being realistic, Morrison stated flatly. Your husband went off trail into a dangerous, isolated area. Whether that was intentional or accidental, the outcome is the same. The case will remain closed. Through a blur of tears, Charlotte examined the backpack's contents with Ranger Patterson while the detective stepped out to take a call. Robert's medical license, warped but readable in its plastic holder. Robert James Henley, M.D. The photo showed his kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, that gentle, reassuring smile she missed so desperately it was a physical ache. His hiking permit dated October 15th, 4 years ago. The ink faded but legible. His phone, the screen a spiderweb of cracks filled with murky water, completely destroyed. The unusual thing, Ranger Patterson said quietly, is where we found this. That Beaver Dam. It's miles downstream from any marked trail. For the pack to end up there, carried by the current, your husband would have had to be somewhere completely off his registered route. The water flow patterns suggest it traveled a significant distance from a very inaccessible place. Charlotte stared at the ruined artifacts of her husband's last day, her mind refusing to accept the official narrative. Robert, who checked weather reports 3 times before leaving. Who carried backup batteries for his backup batteries. It didn't make sense. Sometimes even the most experienced hikers make mistakes, Mrs. Henley, the ranger offered, his sympathy genuine. Or sometimes people just don't want to be found. But Charlotte knew Robert. He would never ever leave her to face this abyss of not knowing. Not after 40 years of marriage. Not after promising they'd spend every day of retirement together. As she left the station, clutching a plastic bag with photocopies of the permits and a receipt for the backpack they were keeping as evidence, she felt more lost than she had in 4 years. The official verdict was clear, but nothing about it felt like closure. Sitting in her car, Charlotte's hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. She needed to talk to someone who knew the Robert the police couldn't see in their data points, the man, not the statistic, his former colleagues. The drive to Cascade Medical Associates was a journey through a minefield of memories. The coffee shop where he'd get his black coffee and blueberry muffin. The park where they'd celebrated his retirement, his colleagues surprising him with a cake shaped like Mount Rainier. The practice itself was alien. A modern, sterile gray had replaced the familiar blue awning. Inside, the warm, comfortable waiting room Robert had insisted upon was gone, replaced by stark white and chrome. "Can I help you?" a young receptionist asked, her eyes devoid of recognition. "I'm Charlotte Henley. My husband, Dr. Robert Henley, used to work here. There's been a development." The receptionist's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, I don't recognize that name." A harried-looking man, the new office manager, explained that the practice had been sold 2 years ago. Most of the staff was new. "But Sarah Winters is still here," he offered. "She worked with Dr. Henley." A wave of relief washed over Charlotte. Sarah had been Robert's favorite nurse. Competent, caring, someone he trusted implicitly. 20 minutes later, Sarah rushed into the break room, her face creasing with concern the moment she saw Charlotte. "Charlotte, oh my goodness." Sarah embraced her warmly. "What is it? You look shattered." The words tumbled out of Charlotte, the backpack, the Beaver Dam, the GPS data, the police's cold conclusion. Sarah listened, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "I can't believe it," Sarah whispered, sinking into a chair. "We still miss him so much here. Those of us who are left anyway. They think he went off trail deliberately, Sarah. They're suggesting suicide." "No," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Charlotte, that's impossible. Your husband loved his work, but he was ecstatic about retirement. He talked about it constantly. The patients adored him. Mrs. Yamamoto still asks about him every time she comes in." "The GPS showed him miles from any marked trail," Charlotte pressed. "The police think that proves he wanted to disappear." Sarah's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something uneasy in her eyes. She glanced toward the closed break room door, then leaned in. "You know, now that you mention it, Robert did seem different that final week." "Different how?" "Anxious," Sarah said, her voice dropping. "Distracted. He kept checking his phone, which wasn't like him. Between appointments, he seemed worried. I asked him about it on that Wednesday, 2 days before he disappeared. He was sitting right where you are, his sandwich untouched. I asked if retirement nerves were getting to him. He gave me this forced smile and said he just had a lot to wrap up." She paused. "It wasn't what he said, Charlotte. It was how he said it." His hands were shaking slightly when he picked up his coffee cup. In 15 years of working with him, I'd never seen Robert's hands shake. A chill traced its way down Charlotte's spine. "Was there anything else?" Sarah hesitated, then spoke in a near whisper. "This is probably nothing, but Dr. Harrison's behavior that week was odd." Dr. James Harrison, Robert's boss and old friend, a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and an easy, charming smile. They'd had dinner with him and his wife, Patricia, dozens of times. "Harrison wouldn't let anyone help with Robert's patient transitions," Sarah continued. "Normally it's all hands on deck, but Harrison insisted on handling all of it himself. He was here until midnight several nights that week. I know because I came back for my car keys one evening around 11. His office light was on, and I could see stacks and stacks of file boxes. The strangest thing is he took them all home with him. He didn't store them in our secure records room. Robert never mentioned Harrison acting oddly." "That's the thing," Sarah said. During the day, Harrison was his usual self, cheerful, supportive, even threw Robert that beautiful retirement party, but after hours, I don't know. I'm probably reading too much into it." "You said Harrison sold the practice?" Charlotte asked, a new unsettling puzzle piece clicking into place. "Made a fortune," Sarah confirmed, a hint of disapproval in her tone. "Opened a new, state-of-the-art, multi-specialty practice across town. He's doing very well. There was an article in a medical journal about his innovative billing practices. Very different from the Harrison who used to say patient care came first." After Sarah left, Charlotte sat alone, the fluorescent lights of the break room humming. Robert, anxious. Harrison, working late, taking files home, a lucrative sale. It was a constellation of facts with no connecting lines. Yet, she thought of all those dinners, the easy laughter, the shared stories. Harrison had given a beautiful, moving eulogy at Robert's memorial, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke of integrity and dedication. Now Sarah's words echoed. What had happened in Robert's final week? What had made his steady surgeon's hands shake? The storage unit smelled of mothballs and thyme. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the small window, illuminating dancing dust motes. After Sarah's revelation, Charlotte had to look through Robert's things with new eyes. She'd boxed up his entire home office, too grief-stricken to sort through it. Now it felt like an archaeological dig into the last days of his life. In the fourth box, wedged between two thick medical journals, she found it. Robert's leather day planner from his final year. He'd always been old-fashioned, preferring the tactile certainty of pen and paper. Her fingers trembled as she flipped to October, to the week he disappeared. Monday, October 12th. Staff meeting 7 a.m. Johnson surgery 9 a.m. Lunch Bahar, Charlotte, Tuscany's, 1 p.m. Tuesday, October 13th. Round 6:30 a.m. Clinic until 5. Retirement party 6 p.m. Wednesday, October 14th. Patterson and Associates 2 p.m. evening. Review files. Thursday, October 15th. Meeting Wimars Harrison Trail. Parking lot, 7 a.m. Charlotte stared at the last entry, her world tilting on its axis. October 15th. The day Robert disappeared. He had told her he was hiking alone, that he needed a day with the mountain to clear his head. But here, in his careful, precise handwriting, was a planned meeting with Harrison. At the trailhead, at the exact time he left the house. Why had he lied? She flipped back to Wednesday's entry, Patterson and Associates. Digging deeper into the box, she found a manila folder. Inside, paper-clipped together, were 2 receipts from Patterson and Associates, employment law specialists. The consultations were dated October 7th and 14th. Robert had been seeing an employment lawyer, a whistleblower lawyer. Her heart pounding, Charlotte pulled out her phone and dialed the number from the letterhead. After a brief hold, a polite paralegal was on the line. "I'm limited in what I can share due to attorney-client privilege," the woman Miranda explained. "However, I can confirm that Dr. Henley's initial inquiry was regarding employment whistleblower protections." Charlotte's mouth went dry. "Whistleblower?" "Yes." He specifically asked about protection from retaliation and how to properly document evidence of workplace issues. He was scheduled for a follow-up on October 16th, but he never showed. Mr. Patterson was quite concerned. He said, "Doctor." Henley sounded very worried during their last conversation and kept asking if his family would be protected if he came forward. Protected from what? The question hung in the stale air of the storage unit. A meeting with Harrison he'd hidden from her. Secret consultations with a whistleblower attorney. Charlotte loaded the crucial boxes into her car. As she turned onto her street, she saw it. A familiar silver Mercedes in her driveway. Harrison's car. He was standing by her front door talking animatedly with her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who waved enthusiastically. "Charlotte, I was just telling Dr. Harrison you were out. He's been waiting." Harrison turned, his familiar handsome smile in place. But she saw it now. A tightness around his eyes, a tension in his shoulders that his expensive suit couldn't hide. "Charlotte," he said warmly, approaching her. "I heard about the backpack. The police contacted me. I wanted to see how you were handling this news." "That's kind of you, James," she replied, acutely aware of the boxes in her back seat. "I told Dr. Harrison you'd gone to your storage unit," Mrs. Chen chimed in, oblivious. "Spring cleaning, I assumed." Charlotte saw the flicker in Harrison's eyes at the mention of the storage unit. It was gone in an instant, but she'd seen it. "Sorting through old things?" Harrison asked, his voice casual but carrying an edge she'd never heard before. "Find anything interesting? Sometimes going through old things can bring unexpected surprises." The question felt loaded, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Just memories," Charlotte said, her voice steady. "If you'll excuse me, James, it's been a long day." Of course, he said, stepping aside. But then he added, "If you need anything, Charlotte, anything at all, please call." Robert was very important to me. I'd hate for his legacy to be tarnished by any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. The word hung in the air. Inside, with the door locked, she peered through the front window. Harrison was still there, standing by his car, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. The day planner sat in her purse, that single entry burning like a hot coal. The doorbell rang moments later. It was Harrison, his expression rearranged into one of gentle concern. Every instinct screamed no, but she saw an opportunity. "I was wondering," he said, his voice soft, "if you'd like to get coffee. Sometimes it helps to talk." "I suppose a cup of coffee would be nice," she said, her own voice a stranger's. At Corner Coffee, her and Robert's favorite spot, Charlotte chose a table in the busy main area, not the cozy back corner Harrison suggested. He returned with their drinks, a vanilla latte for her, black coffee for him. "Robert talked about you constantly," Harrison began, the perfect picture of a grieving friend. "He was devoted to you." The words, which should have been comforting, felt like a probe. "Going through his things must be so emotional," he continued, his fingers starting a rhythmic tap against the table. Did you find any work files? Any personal journals?" "Robert wasn't much of a journal keeper," Charlotte said, watching his jaw tighten. "How about appointment books? He always carried that old leather planner." His attempt at casual interest was failing. Charlotte made a decision. "Actually, I did find his day planner." Harrison's fingers stopped drumming. "Oh?" "Yes." It was interesting looking at his final week. There was an entry on October 15th that confused me. She let the silence stretch, watching his face. He'd written, "Meeting with Harrison. Trail parking lot, 7 a.m., but he told me he was hiking alone." The transformation was instant. The mask of concern didn't just slip, it shattered. A flicker of pure panic crossed his face before being replaced by a hollow, forced laugh. "Oh, that." Poor Robert. He was so confused that morning. He called me around 6:30, sounding agitated, worried about his mental state. I tried to talk him out of hiking, but he insisted he needed time alone. Charlotte stared at the man she thought she'd known for 15 years, watching him construct a lie with terrifying ease. "Charlotte." Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "I didn't want to burden you, but Robert had been showing signs of severe depression for weeks. The retirement transition was devastating for him." The lie was so blatant, so insulting to Robert's memory that it gave Charlotte a cold, clarifying anger. Robert hadn't been depressed, he hadn't been confused. He'd had an appointment, and Harrison was desperate to hide it. "I should go," she said, standing abruptly. "Charlotte, wait," he said, rising too. "If you found any documents, anything that could be misinterpreted, I hope you'll let me know. For Robert's sake." "Robert's reputation doesn't need protecting," she said coldly and walked out. In the restroom, her hands shook so violently she could barely dial 911. "I'm at Corner Coffee on Main," she whispered into the phone. "I'm with someone I believe may be dangerous. Dr. James Harrison, please send someone." When she walked back out, her heart stopped. Harrison had moved to her side of the booth, blocking her exit. "There you are," he said, his smile a terrifying parody. I was starting to worry. The pretense was gone. "Don't lie to me, Charlotte. I know you were at the storage unit. What did you find?" "I need to leave," she said, trying to slide past him. He stood, his hand clamping on her elbow. "Let me walk you to your car." It wasn't a request. In the near-empty parking lot, he spun her around, slamming her back against her car. "Where are the files Robert kept? I know he made copies." "I don't know what you're talking about." That's when she saw the gun. He pulled it from his jacket, the movement fluid and practiced, and pressed the cold metal against her ribs. "Get in my car." "James, please." "Get in," he hissed, shoving her toward his Mercedes, "or I'll shoot you right here." He slammed the door, the gun now pointed at her across the console. He drove with one hand, leaving the quiet town behind, heading toward the winding rural roads that led to Mount Rainier. "You should have kept out of this," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You should have just accepted that Robert killed himself." "You killed him," she whispered. Harrison's laugh was bitter. Robert killed himself the moment he decided to be a hero. He found discrepancies in the billing. So what? I was leveling the playing field against the insurance companies. But St. Robert couldn't see the gray areas. He was going to report me, destroy everything I'd built. The familiar roads leading toward the mountain were a nightmare landscape. He turned onto a bumpy dirt road and pulled into a small clearing. "Get out." He shoved her toward a narrow trail leading into the trees, the gun pressed against her back. "We're going to take a little hike, just like Robert did." They'd gone 50 yards into the deep woods when the first siren wailed in the distance. Harrison froze. "No," he muttered. More sirens joined the first, screaming closer. He yanked her roughly against him, spinning her around, his arm clamping around her neck as he pressed the gun to her temple. "Back off!" he shrieked as flashes of red and blue light strobed through the trees. "Everyone back off or I'll kill her!" "Dr. Harrison," Detective Morrison's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Let Mrs. Henley go." The standoff stretched on, minutes feeling like hours. Harrison was trembling, ranting. "I offered him money, enough to travel the world, but no. He had to be noble. He had evidence, copies of everything. Said he was going to the FBI. An officer, a negotiator, took a slow step forward. It was too much for Harrison. With a sound between a sob and a snarl, he raised the gun and brought it down hard against the side of Charlotte's head. Pain exploded, white lights danced, and she was falling. The moment his human shield was gone, Harrison ran. He made it 20 feet before 2 officers in tactical gear burst from the undergrowth, tackling him to the ground. He fought wildly, screaming as they cuffed him. "You don't understand. He destroyed everything. My practice, my reputation, my life. He destroyed it all with his righteousness." An EMT was pressing gauze to Charlotte's bleeding head as they dragged Harrison away, still raving. "He wouldn't listen. I begged him. Where did it get him? Where did it get him?" Later, in the harsh fluorescent light of an interview room, the full story came out. Detective Morrison sat across from her, her expression grim. "Harrison confessed," she said. "He and 2 accomplices met Robert at the trailhead. They followed him up the trail to a remote viewpoint. When Robert refused their final offer of money and said he was going to the FBI, they pushed him." Charlotte closed her eyes, picturing it. "How?" "A 200-foot drop onto rocks," Morrison said gently. "Death would have been instantaneous. He wouldn't have suffered. The motive was even more monstrous than Charlotte had imagined. Not just insurance fraud, but an illegal organ trafficking ring. Harrison was using his practice as a front, accepting black market money for organs, a whole network of corruption. "Robert uncovered it all," Morrison said. "The financial records, patient files that didn't match, unusual bank deposits. He was building a case. Your husband was a brave man, Mrs. Henley. He could have taken the money. Instead, he chose to do the right thing." An officer knocked and entered, whispering to Morrison. The detective's face softened. "Mrs. Henley," she said, her voice filled with a somber respect. "Based on Harrison's confession, they sent a helicopter to the cliff area. They found remains." The words were both a final devastating blow and a release. 4 years of not knowing were over. "Recovery teams are working to bring him home," Morrison said softly. tears flowed freely down Charlotte's face. "I can bury him," she whispered. "I can give him a proper funeral." "Yes," Morrison said. "You can." As Charlotte left the station, the setting sun was painting Mount Rainier in shades of pink and gold. The mountain was no longer a monument to her loss. It was a testament to her husband's courage. Robert had died on its slopes, betrayed and murdered, but he died with his integrity intact. He had faced down an evil that festered behind a healer's mask and had not backed down. Justice, delayed 4 long years, was finally coming. And Robert, her Robert, was finally coming home.